Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we're going to take another look at Lost in Space and some of the facts and theories that were dealt with in the previous seasons as a build-up to season number 3. Alrighty then. There will be mini spoilers for seasons 1 and 2 and possible spoilers for season 3. So if you don't want to see any of those, you can click away now at the links below the video and check out a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird. I have the data, and Humans Are Weird, we took a vote. Probably sentiments that all of the robots, even our beloved robot Robinson, would agree with. So let's not bury the lead. Here's the theory that I came around to at the end of season 2. The robots, from our beloved robot to SAR to the Silvers, they were never after Scarecrow's engine. That was just not their main goal. But Betty, you say, it was explicitly stated in the show that that's what they were after. Yes, and who said that? The primary source of that information is Maureen Robinson, and consistently the show has shown that she is wrong about everything that is not directly in her field of study in engineering. Maureen Robinson is an engineer. She's a very good engineer, and in those subjects which directly relate to her engineering degree, she's a decent scientist. But she's very, very bad and poor at analyzing the things that fall outside of her specialty, which is a very, very common with the issue you have with brilliant engineers. It's like a defining feature of engineers. They joke about it themselves. And so our primary source of this information is wrong. Likewise, everybody's we've talked to, from Hastings, the antagonist of season 2, and Dr. Ben Adler, they've all been very, very wrong about many things about the robots. Brilliant in their own fields, i.e. administration and robotic linguists, but not very good at dealing with issues outside of their field. So what's the evidence for this theory? Well, let's take a look at it. The very first piece of evidence for this theory is admittedly flimsy, but it's what jerked my brain in this direction and started me thinking on about it. When, in the scene where the fake Dr. Smith escaped the interrogation room and overhears the two crew outside of Scarecrow's engine, these two crew members say there was always the risk that they would come back for it. They, plural, would come back. They, plural, had been there before. There being the Resolute. They being more than just one robot, which suggests that the robots had been there before. They knew where Scarecrow and his engine was the entire time. So why attack when they did? Why didn't they send more robots? Why did they choose to attack then? At the beginning of our story. Granted, that's a whole lot to hang on two words, but I was rewatching season 1 to get some good reference shots of SAR, and I froze frame on the image of SAR and Robot looking into the chariot where Judy and Penny were hiding. I had froze frame on this particular image because it provides an excellent size, mass, and color comparison for SAR and Robot. Now, this is a very interesting scene. Robot had forced the Jupiter space door open, which is interesting. This is the first and only time that an attacking robot opens the door instead of blasting through the wall. This is your first bit of evidence that Robot's still trying to preserve Robinson's safety. Then SAR turns towards Robot, and SAR's faceplate alters to this elliptical shape. Robot's face immediately altered to match the same elliptical shape. Then Robot points, and Robot and SAR both turn to look at where Robot is pointing. At the time, I thought that SAR was asking where the engine was, and Robot was telling him. Pointing is a very specific answer to the very specific question, where is X? The ellipse seemed a direct reference to the elliptical engine. And interestingly enough, Robot does give this exact answer. The pointing and the slow head turn 2 other times in the show. Once to answer the question, where do we take Scarecrow from Will? And once to answer Judy Robinson when she asks, where did you bring us? When he had brought him to the Fortuna. But even before season 2, this seemed a bit odd to me. It was pretty clear that the robots could sense each other to some degree. Robots like Fegs found his body after all, and then in season 2 it was confirmed that not only could SAR sense the engine, even his detached arm could locate and seek out the engine. So there was literally no reason for SAR to ask Robot where this particular engine was. But looking at this image, it suddenly occurred to me that Robot wasn't pointing at the engine. The engine was under the chariot, almost on the floor. To be pointing at the engine, Robot's entire arm would have had to be angled over 45 degrees lower than it is. And it isn't just his arm. Both the robot's face and SAR's face turn to look at some point. At the same point. This gives us triangulation. 3 vectors from 3 different origin points pointing at the same point in space. This is a very important concept in science fiction, and there is no way it's coincidental. The creators really want us to know exactly where they are looking at and what they are pointing at. And Robot is pointing directly at Judy Robinson. This heavily implies, that the question that SAR asked was, where is Judy Robinson? However, as she is literally right there in plain sight, her face was looking right at SAR, her name was on her chest plate facing him. This means that SAR had no direct data on Judy Robinson. He didn't know her face or her name. The robots have no trouble identifying and differentiating humans, as shown by the silvers recognizing Will, so SAR must have been looking for a concept whose literal definition was Judy Robinson, but who he only had data for in the abstract. Now, the only clues we have are what prior knowledge SAR had and the image he used to ask the question. Now, the only human interaction the robots could have possibly had was with the Fortuna and Grant Kelly, the only named member of the expedition, Judy Robinson's biological father. Judy Robin is his biological daughter. As I said, at the end of season 1, ignorant of Grant Kelly's location within 20 light years of the robot's home system, I assumed the ellipse referred to the engine. But Robot didn't answer the question with the location of the engine, but the location of Grant Kelly's daughter. When I looked at the ellipse again, I noticed something odd. Both the image on SAR's and Robot's display had a secondary pair of ellipses at each end of the larger ellipse. The engine does not have any such markings or structural form. In fact, the markings on the side of the elliptical engine are almost the exact opposite of the image on the robot's faces. Now, this could just be a hieroglyphical stylization of the word in the robot's language, but do you know what does have that littler ellipses on the ends of the larger ellipse shape and look? The daughter cells of the process of biological reproduction. And the only 2 clues we have to answer the question of why SAR would ask a question that Robot answered by pointing at Judy Robinson was that shape and the fact that she is the biological daughter of Grant Kelly. So, what if the question SAR asked was, where is the daughter of Grant Kelly? The fact that Grant Kelly had a daughter is something that the robots could have known because Maureen was pregnant before Grant left on his ill-fated mission, so it is possible. Now, what about other foreshadowing hints from the show? Judy's first line in the series is to ask why the Resolute suddenly malfunctioned after 23 trips. If she was the reason, that was an ironic question. Of course, John Robinson doesn't believe in irony. Don West himself points out that this is in fact itself ironic. Also, you have the fact that the first named victim of the robot attack that we interact with in the show is the real Dr. Smith, a pediatrician. Now, that's a doctor for children. Now, this is very interesting because the only doctors that we know were actively working in the medical bay of the Resolute on that trip were the pediatricians. We know this from the scene where Penny and Will are playing with the electrostatic field around Scarecrow's engine room, and Maureen tells them to go get their immune boosting shots. So it is reasonable to assume that Dr. Smith was at work inoculating the kids when the robots attacked, which means that the robots attacked at the very least near the medical bay, if not the medical bay itself, which was where you might expect to find a doctor, like Judy Robinson. The only other relative we hear mentioned is the grandma of the cookies. Now, we don't know if this is the same grandma as Maureen's mother with the farm, but the fact that Maureen doesn't know the recipe suggests not. That leaves 2 other options. She might have been Grandma Robinson or Grandma Kelly. But it is interesting that this grandma gave the recipes, the code, to Judy and to no one else. Because if this was Grandma Kelly, there there was another code that she gave to Judy and no one else, her X chromosome, which would have passed directly, unmingled, from the grandma to Grant Kelly to Judy. This perspective also makes Robinson's behavior on the nameless planet seem more deliberate, and I've gone over in other videos that Robot Robinson from the beginning was a free agent following his own agenda, not slaved to Will's control. If Robot's goal was to keep Judy Robinson contained but alive but stuck on the planet until she could be retrieved, all of his actions make perfect sense. He rescues Judy from the ice, which follows his prerogative to keep her alive and allows him to integrate himself with the Robinsons so that he can work better with them. He locks Will in the storage bay, which handily allows the eels to eat the fuel, keeping the Jupiter trapped on the nameless planet. He lets Will out only after the eels have eaten enough fuel to strand the Robinsons, but not enough to keep them trapped in the ice. If Robot hadn't locked Will in the closet, the Robinsons could have flown up and got away from the planet, getting help from the Resolute immediately. The humans would have been gone long before SAR arrived in the system. And after Robot defeats the Moth Chomper, he interestingly turns his attention to where John, Penny, and Judy are hiding, ignoring Will and the rest of the colonists in favor of focusing on Judy. Another interesting thing is the timing of Robot's walking off that cliff. Now, Will didn't know, but Robot sure did, that was not a death sentence. It was at worst for Robot an inconvenience. It simply eliminated Robot from the equation until he was reassembled. And looking at it from this perspective means that Robot wasn't being controlled by Will, but chose to walk off that cliff, which we can be pretty sure of regardless of this theory. From the perspective of a soldier whose mission was to keep his mark on planet and alive, but eventually turn her over to who knows what fate, and then started having second thoughts, it makes perfect sense. Robot didn't want to hurt Will. Robot knew that Will and Judy were close. Judy had just found the fuel they needed to get to the Resolute and was headed back to camp. The humans would have been off planet and out of system long before SAR got there. However, Robot would have been obligated as an officer and a soldier to prevent that if he was able when she got back to camp. As far as Robots knew, when he walked off that cliff, he would wake up in a few days when SAR arrived, and when SAR demanded to know where the humans had gone, Robot could just shrug and say, I don't know, I fell off this cliff. Robot was removing the threat that he posed to the colony, to Judy, to Will. It seems from the way that he reacted to the Moth Chomper and getting attacked by Angela that Robot has programs or orders that can at least partially override his own will under certain circumstances. But then the fuel gets lost, time passes by, and by the time Robot does wake up, SAR is already in system and zeroing in on him. When Robot accesses his computer in the ship, you actually see SAR's ship swooping into the system. And when Robot grabs the chariot, he's not following Dr. Smith's orders necessarily. He's stopping Judy from leaving. He gets his engine and Judy into space to meet SAR. He shows SAR where Judy is. And this might also explain why SAR tried to kill Will, but not any of the others in the bay. If he knew that he was looking for a human female and could tell the difference, and he needed the human female alive, Will would have been the only one who was obviously not Judy and therefore expendable. But then Robot fully turns on SAR and fights him off the Jupiter 2, leaving his engine with Judy on the Jupiter. The engine then jumps the Jupiter 2 to the safest place Robot Robinson knows, his own homeworld, a place where everything the Robinsons need to survive and plentiful methane, the only thing that they've been grousing about needing this entire time. Once the Robinsons are gone and the Resolute follows them to the danger system, SAR leaves the Resolute crippled in orbit and leaves Scarecrow to die. And by the evidence of the horse, leaves the engine on the Resolute. Now, where do I get off saying that Robot left the engines on the Resolute? So, according to Marine at the beginning of the series, the gravity on the Resolute is artificial, an illusion of gravity created by the thrust. But when the Robinsons arrive on the Resolute in the danger system, the Resolute isn't moving, but the gravity is still 100% intact. Now, it might have been spin gravity, and they didn't show us that the Resolute was spinning in space, but every science fiction show ever loves to show you if a spaceship is spinning to create artificial gravity, and this one didn't. And you can see that the the thrust is angled downward from the tip of the Resolute to the thrusters. You can't get that with spin, you have to get that with thrust, and the Resolute was not under thrust. It was just holding position. And when the Robinsons get on there, the horse is still alive and healthy. It's skinny, but it's alive and healthy. A horse would die nearly instantly in microgravity. It'd start thrashing and it'd break its legs, which is a death sentence for a horse. So the fact that that horse was still on the Resolute means that there was stable gravity on the Resolute for the entire time. And as we learned, the stable gravity is generated by the robot's engines. So that means that Scarecrow's engine never left the Resolute. Now where it was and why Scarecrow didn't summon it back at the end, we don't know. Maybe Sar hacked it and sent it off to hide in the walls of the Resolute so the humans couldn't use it, therefore stranding the Resolute there and creating a lure for the Robinsons. But we have no idea where Scarecrow's engines was on the Resolute, only that it was there because of the gravity. But the big main bit of foreshadowing for this theory, the robots were after Judy Robinson, was the scene where Judy and John Robinson are waiting for the silver robots in front of Grant Kelly's memorial. In that scene, they are chasing the engine and Judy both. And once the robots are free again, they head for both the engine and Judy on the T8. Now, when they're supposed to be singular focused on the engine, but they stop to consider Will Robinson, and after they identify him as Will Robinson, decide to crisp him. As if they were checking to make sure this wasn't Judy Robinson, and once they were sure he wasn't, he was of no importance. And then, and this is the interesting part, rather than let the T8 escape, Mohawk, the lead silver robot, tried to destroy it, only being stopped by Scarecrow. This move on Mohawk part doesn't really make sense if he was sent to rescue the engine or retrieve an expensive engine. However, if he was sent with capture or kill orders for an enemy target, this makes perfect sense. Now, the why is more vague, but there are some clues provided and that offer some interesting possibilities. The alien tech can be used by humans even without much meddling. Maureen and fake Dr. Smith were able to open the engine compartment on the robot's ship, even when the robot wasn't touching it. So it makes sense that the Grant Kelly, an astronaut who was smart enough to earn Maureen's respect, might have been able to use the alien tech. He might have been able to do something, lock some door, encrypt some important bit of information, and he might have coded it to his genetics. And the ellipse Sar asked Robot about might have been asking about the genetic daughter of Grant Kelly. So, what if, from the robot's perspective, Judy Robinson is the MacGuffin driving the series? What if they are after a key that will open some door for them? What if they were after the daughter of Grant Kelly? Or rather, Judy Robinson. So, what do you think? Can you shoot any holes in this theory? Do you see any obvious flaws in it? Either way, we're probably going to find out in Season 3, and I'm looking forward to that. By the time this video airs, we should be 2 days out. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so check out the links below the video for a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird, I Took a Vote, or Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, or Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Hit that like and subscribe button. Check to make sure you're still subscribed. If you've already subscribed, YouTube doesn't subscribe. And peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.